lose the immigration officers that are processing. So we're looking for an HEO and 3 EOs on that side.
And that's already in
But we're looking for the result. We have to have the budget before we can do that.
That's the way it works. Yeah. And last question on this section. How many enforcement visits to employers are conducted on a monthly basis, approximately, on average?
We don't do enforcement visits on employers because we don't have the legislation to support that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Morehouse, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Morehouse. Thank you, Mr. Warnberg.
Thank you. Moving on to public finances. In July, there was an increase in some fees, for example, the in-country immigration applications. Can you explain the reasons for the increase, please?
So the increase followed the UK. We have always followed the UK in terms of their fees. I think,
we have.
Yeah.
We've always aligned with the UK. And that's more so where we don't become a backdoor into the UK with having a lower fee for people to come, get their visa and then hop into the UK.
Thank you. That's reassuring. How much revenue is currently generated from immigration and customs related activities, and how can this be increased to support the goal of generating over £200 million in additional annual revenues?
Where's the, £2 million additional revenues?
Yeah, just looking at in terms of getting the additional revenues for the government, is immigration going to be able to provide that support?
So how much revenue is currently generated?
Okay.
Yes, to start with from immigration and custom-related activities.
And customs-related activities. Okay, so we're talking about the VAT agreement as well and all the customs that we collect. Yeah. Okay, well, I don't have those figures for you right now.
That's okay, if you could supply them to us. Are you looking at increasing the overall general revenue to support, this is what Mr. Morehouse is explaining, the overall 200 million aim for the UK, for the Isle of Man government?
In terms of actually collecting more money?
Yeah.
I don't think the fees would be built into that extent, no. I don't think their figures are, I think they're more, if any additional collection is really will make the system more robust in terms of the immigration service more robust.
Okay, we'll try reverse question then.
Yeah, try reverse question.
So the Chief Minister recently spoke about is targeted to save £10 million across the public sector.
Saving £10 million.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
In terms of that area, is there anything that you can do to assist the Chief Minister in his goals?
That's a very difficult one. We're looking at it more from a Treasury perspective. So in terms of any savings, we'd be looking at it. Treasury as a whole department making savings. When you're looking at savings in service industries like ours, we don't actually have an awful lot of costs to make savings on. In terms of, we have staff, so you can reduce staff, which at the moment I don't foresee it, certainly in immigration, because they need all the staff that they've got, and certainly in customs too. But if you're looking at any other costs in terms of savings, that's going to be quite difficult because we don't actually have that much expenditure.
And so currently, how many people are in the division right now?
In immigration, I think there's 20, or is it 30?
We've got 30.
30 in immigration. And how much are you looking to increase that by over the next, say, year?
So there's only another 4 in terms of the HEO in 3 years, isn't there? Yeah. That's it.
And with the digitisation, should that free up some work?
It might do. The 4 officers that we're going to take on, they're on a 2 years limited term, so we can reassess at that point.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just moving now on to skilled labour attraction. How can immigration policies be adapted to attract the skilled labour needed to fill the 5,000 new jobs envisaged in the economic strategy?
How is what? Sorry.
How can immigration policies be adapted to attract the skilled labour need?
Okay, so we don't really deal with the policies as such. It's a difficult
You
one really
experience it
for
at
us
the
to
coalface,
answer.
though, don't you? So what sort of changes or policies you think could improve? Because you've obviously got a wealth of knowledge in that area, and you obviously day to day.
It's very much what sort of market you want to attract. I mean, whether you want to attract high earners and highly skilled people, or whether you need a labour market at at a different level.
So it's a skilled labour market.
It's very much, yes. So the skilled market. I don't know really. Yeah. How would we attract them?
Yeah. What policy? What could be made easier internally, perhaps, or to attract people to come here? Because obviously, what happens with, you hear an awful lot about visas taking a long time, and it's taking the process. I'm just giving you an example, just taking a long time in terms of the processes, and that can obviously detract from somebody wanting to come to the island. So, what sort of things could be done to help improve that?
Yeah, certainly a process that was nice and easy to use for the employer and the applicant would be much better, and would certainly assist in that respect. How we can do that is something we need to think about.
And have you looked at what measures you could take to streamline certain immigration areas for certain types of skills? Or is it as a whole?
Yeah, it's more of a whole, really. We have considered the employer's licensing scheme that we used to have in, and I think that you can either see that as a help or a hindrance, because it takes time to get the license in the first place, and the employer. But once you have the license, then we're sort of saying, well, that is an employer that is licensed, and that makes it easier for that employer then to bring people in.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wallenberg.
Thank you. Back to me. Infrastructure. It was discussed at the government conference, and I did see your presentation, and I thought it was very good.
Thank you.
It was discussed at the government conference that the immigration system is being digitised.
Yes.
I think we touched on that earlier. Have you had any specific challenges emerge during this process?
Okay, so we're not very far on the process at the moment. The digitisation will have to link in internationally. If we don't link in internationally, then it's going to be very difficult for us to travel and to bring immigrants into the Isle of Man. So it is something we have to do. I don't think we have a choice on that. So the challenge is to make sure that the Isle of Man is included in that process, and that we will be facilitated in that way.
And that our system would interface with the UK system?
Yes. Okay. We did, to do that ourselves would be an extortionate cost.
Yeah. Okay. And
so we have to work really closely with the UK. Yeah. They are very engaged now with us.
Good.
And the other Crown dependencies as well. So we're starting that process now.
Well, that's gives comfort.
Yeah.
Thank you. Has your division seen efficiencies as a result of the digitalisation that has happened thus far? If so,
not yet.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Could you give us an idea as to who is leading the interface with the UK for what you just mentioned?
The digitisation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a team. Amy Swales from our office is looking at that in terms of from the immigration officer's perspective. We've also got business change services. Neil Smith is the manager on the project lead on that side. And so we have one other member of staff from our office as well that's working on it.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Is this in addition to their day-to-day job, or is this
No,
the reason?
we've put them as a separate lead
Okay.
because they will need to concentrate on this
Okay, that's
due to the importance of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's for a 2-year period,
okay.
and that's just happened this month.
Excellent.
That is good news. Yeah, thank you. With further infrastructure and service improvements, what further infrastructure and service improvements are necessary to support population growth to 100,000 from an immigration and customs perspective? So what further infrastructure and service improvements are necessary, do you think?
Okay, so the digitisation is quite important, obviously.
Yeah, beyond that, sorry.
Yeah, we're on that. From my perspective, we'd like to all be in one building. I think we'd work better. So accommodation from our perspective is quite important.
How are you
Work-
split now? How is
Yeah,
that?
so-
Just let us know.
So we haven't really moved as such. The law enforcement team obviously is now one team
Yeah.
altogether, and they operate out of our customs house. The immigration team are still where they are, but we've expanded into the ground floor of CGO. I think you all know that customs house is in need of some work, considerable amount of work, and we will need another home at some point.
And what improvements would that bring if you were in one building?
I think we could integrate certainly the teams.
Yeah.
So you've got the support team that could further support and help immigration. That's been quite a struggle, getting the two teams working together on that. We could also integrate the policy and legislation teams as well. So that would provide a little bit more resilience within the department. And also it'd make it a lot easier for the management team if we were all in
You
one
talked
building.
earlier about how they're learning different jobs
Yeah.
to be more resilient. Would that improve resilience then if they're...
It would. They are still very different functions. You know, customs, having VAT knowledge. I can never see having one compliance team that did both customs and immigration. I don't think that would ever work. But certainly in terms of the support and the legislation and the policy side, I think, yes, it would.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morberg.
Thank you. What is the current number of trained enforcement officers involved in immigration control?
Well,
There's two. There's casework, there's in country, and then there's at the borders.
Well, let's have them all.
Pardon?
Let's have each of them.
How many's in Adam's team?
which in Adam's team.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's the law enforcement team. There's 9, 10, 11, 12. I had to think about it then. I think
I'll
it's
count
12.
them up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can come back to us with that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure there's 12 in the law enforcement team.
Is that sufficient?
Okay, so if we're just looking at the borders, we have a shift pattern that rotates, but it's not enough to meet every single aircraft and every single boat. To do that, you would need a 24-hour crew, really, and more than 3 in each team. So in each team, you've only ever got 3 people that are actually on duty,
Right.
other than the management. So you couldn't split yourself between the airport and the customs port, because you wouldn't leave any officer on their own in
Okay.
a particular position. You would need a lot bigger team to do it. I think you'd probably need about six people on each of those teams.
And 3
And
teams.
there are periods where we don't have any cover from the way the shift patterns work. You'd have to put at least another team of 3 in to be able to cover everything, at least. So it depends what you want. You know, we are still in the CTA and in the customs area, so we don't have to meet every boat. You do it on a risk basis. We do need to meet the requirements of the CTA in terms of the boats and the aircraft that come from outside of the CT area. That's a requirement, and we do meet those, and we do the scheduling to make sure that we meet those. They're the priority. And then we have the customs side of things in terms of actual imports and things like that. But then you also have our duties in terms of detecting goods, etc., that shouldn't be coming into the island.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morehouse.
Thank you. Moving on now to border security. Do you see the need for any additional control, border control challenges as the Isle of Man's population increase? You gave kind of an input there in terms of the teams being bigger, but is that something that will also be required in terms of the population increasing, or is the population number itself independent
I
of
don't
what you
think
do?
they're necessarily correlated. You know,
Yeah.
it's. I think the border security is more about security of the island, full stop. Whether you've got a large population or a small population, it's something that is important to the island to ensure.
Thank you. In terms of when you're screening individuals, how do you actually deal with risk to our population? How is that actually assessed and considered?
Risk to our population
Yeah.
in terms of screening.
Screening the new residents, potential residents, how's that? Is that one of these things that is considered in terms of assessing applicants?
I'm sorry, I'm
When you're considering the applicants,
the
Is-
immigration
Yeah.
applications, right?
is the actual risk to our existing population ever considered as one of the objectives you're considering?
A risk of increasing the population?
No, just
or
in terms of the
increase
risk to the existing population, the potential they could have for negative.
Are there any measures? Let's start with that.
For the job's assessed. So obviously a risk to say a local person not getting that job over a migrant, those type of risks.
Could be, for example. Yes.
Yeah, for the job there is, that's assessed under the resident labour market test. So we'll look to say, has that job been advertised? Does it meet this criteria? So that kind of is checked, and that before a migrant will get the job.
And we do check the migrants' credentials as well. They go through a screening process, if that's what you're asking. Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And in terms of that, what are you looking for? What kind of key factors are assessed as part of that?
So, most of the checks are in terms of security checks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the entry clearance ones, the UK do them on our behalf. So they're the same checks as what they would do for someone entering the UK, which is about who they are, are they who they are, criminal convictions, a whole host of measures are checked. If it's a further leave, so if they're here on Ireland and they want further leave, we do due diligence and we do police checks as well.
And since Brexit, has that become more challenging, or is it using the same systems?
It's the same. It's just there's more people under immigration control now. So that there used to be a whole host of cohorts under immigration control. It's everybody bar Brits and Irish nationals now. So there is more people.
Right, thank you. It was stated at the government conference that there have been abuses of our immigration system, and we know that some of these involved those migrants to the Isle of Man being taken advantage of. For example, it was stated that immigrants have been charged fees by employers or recruitment firms for obtaining visas, which they then have to pay back from their salaries.
Yeah.
What consequences do the firms or agencies face for doing this?
So we don't have any laws against the. We don't have any laws on the advisory side. It is something that the Task and Finish group are actually considering, and it is something that will need addressing at some point. In the UK, they do have a regulation of advisors that we don't have here. And it is something that needs considering, definitely.
Right. And in cases where the employer underpays migrant staff, what are the consequences both for the migrant employees and for the employer involved? What happens to their visas? Are any cancelled or refused? And what are the implications for the employers in such situations? Can they also rehire migrants afterwards?
Yeah.
So in those situations, because we're in the visa side, we will look to the migrant who holds the visa to see what's happened and what their situation is. If it is that we find that they haven't been paid right, we will approach the employer, whether that's a payroll error or which has been the case in the past, or it could be because they're not paying the right amount of money. So it will either be pay the right amount of money, or the migrant would lose their visa. So the consequences on the migrant, not the employer, in those situations. So we would then look to the migrant. They could have the opportunity to switch, move jobs if they get what we call confirmation of employment from another employer. So they could move to another employer on those occasions.
And in terms of that historical assessment, are you happy with the results? Do things tend to fall into place once you've identified an issue?
No, it's not an easy one to tackle, and I don't think it's easy for any authority to tackle. The problem with advisors' fees is a difficult thing to challenge. The way the UK do it is back through regulation of advisors, but you can only have regulation of somebody that's in your jurisdiction. You can't regulate somebody that is in another jurisdiction, and that advisor may be in another jurisdiction that is taking those fees.
And do you have repeat offenders, or does it tend to be one-offs that you deal with?
An employer.
You don't have to say their names, but do you have repeat offenders, employer repeat offenders?
So
is that normal?
No.
Or is it usually just a one-off scenario?
It's normally dealt with, yeah. So once it's addressed, if they've brought in migrants under that named employer, we'll sort the migrants out, and then that it depends what ongoing action is taking place. But they would tend not to get any more migrants.
We would work with the police on these cases. It wouldn't just be an immigration.
Right. Yeah, the next question actually takes it slightly further, potentially. What sanctions can be imposed on employers by the Immigration Authority if migrants are employed in violation of their visa conditions, or if they are found to be underpaid or contracted out?
We don't have any.
So there's nothing at all. So that's
not in the immigration, no.
That's dealt with by the police, is it?
No, it's through. It depends if it's criminal. So if it's administrative through immigration, we would take action, but that piece of legislation needs to be updated.
Right. Okay, and why have patterns of multiple fraudulent visa applications not been addressed more rigorously?
I think they haven't come to light in the past,
Right.
but they are coming to light now.
And
I think in some respects it's having that information and being able to get that information off the system, and that's one of the reasons why we updated the immigration system, so that we can now pull stats off it. We can see who are applying for COEs, which employer they're linked to, etc., which we couldn't get all that data in one go, but we can now.
So you feel quite confident that issue is now under control?
I wouldn't say in control, but we're addressing it. We're definitely addressing it.
We are addressing it, and it also tallies up with the job, because it was the job that they were doing that was an issue, and now we can see the process right through to the actual job and the job vacancy and what that job is. And
we can link the applications to employers, so we can see how they link to which employers.
Thank you. The government's seeking to extend the UK modern slavery legislation to the Isle of Man. Is your division involved in this?
No, they're leading on that.
Right, so that's a separate thing completely. And three, how effective is the honesty box style of regulation for employers? What measures are in place to address instances of rule violation by the employers?
So are you talking about rule violation in terms of Employer Act?
So if they haven't, obviously if they've not paid their staff, examples that we were given earlier, you've kind of got this sort of like an honesty box sort of scenario. So how that's the style of regulation that there is. Obviously, is that working? Is that...
So if an employee isn't paid, they will tend to come and tell us, and then we'll address that with the employer. Like I said before, we'll bring them in and either what's going on, why aren't they...
What if they don't come and tell you? What if they don't... Yeah. They're not aware that they should tell you as an authority? We wouldn't know. We wouldn't know unless we do the tallies with income tax. So when they come for their leave, so the first piece of leave entry clearance, they don't have a footprint. But when they come to get further leave, to get that next piece of leave and to stay here, they have to meet the requirements of the first piece of leave. One of them is paid the appropriate salary, paid your income tax, and do this our gateway with tax. So that's all checked. So we'll either pick it up when they come to get their next piece of leave, or they'll come and tell us.
So what you're really asking is how their welfare. Are we checking on their welfare after the? No, we're not. Yeah. But that is one of the points of putting in place this immigration sort of compliance team, that will have that side of it. At the moment, we just don't have the staff to be going out and doing that.
Thank you. In November 2023, new applicants to seasonal worker immigration routes were closed. Was this due to the modern slavery case that was identified last year? And if so, can you speak on how this immigration route was being exploited?
So the case is ongoing, so we can't really talk about that. What can we say?
It was a consequence of what was in the media, but the cases are ongoing.
Okay, should we move on from that?
Yeah.
Right. What consideration will be given to the reopening of this immigration route or opening new immigration routes for similar purposes if there continues to be a need for example the hospitality industry workers, because they've raised several concerns about actually getting workers when they require them? Is that something that's under consideration?
I think it's a policy decision that needs to be made in terms of and it probably links into the minimum salary for immigration as well. It links into that piece of work of what we actually want in terms of migration into the Isle of Man, and at what level and what's the suitable side, because you do have to think about the welfare of an immigrant. Obviously, they need to have enough money to be able to live here in the Isle of Man. It's not, you know, there's certain expenses they need to be able to cover. Housing, etc. So you need to think about that as well. So it's a policy decision, I think. And when that decision is made, maybe immigration will obviously feed into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Warneberg, do you have any other questions?
Thank you. You said they need to have enough money.
Yeah.
And I would agree.
Yeah.
So what is the amount of money that they
I wouldn't know. I think somebody needs to work that one out. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Because you know, they need to live somewhere, they need to eat, and they need to be able to look after themselves. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
if they don't, then obviously that then has a wider implication for the Isle of Man government.
Yeah, exactly. So for those on worker visas, is it the case that they cannot receive public funds?
That's right.
And if they are government workers, they are receiving public funds.
If they're what, sorry?
If they're government workers.
Government workers.
If they are working for somewhere in government, doing something.
As an immigrant?
Yeah.
Is that the public funds is defined as... So, do you mean salary?
Maybe the public funds I was alluding to, firstly, was to do with payment benefits, but the second one is a salary.
As a
Right.
salary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you're then looking at a government in two different perspectives, aren't you? You're looking at a government as an employer
Yeah.
and paying a salary, or a government as,
Two different things.
yeah, two different things.
Okay. All right, sorry if I conflicted. I think I did. It's the chair's fault.
It's always my fault. Just finally, just looking a little bit of the UK government and legislation. Now, obviously, this is really kind of more whether you have a view on it as opposed to, and if you don't have a view, don't worry. But really, obviously, we've just had quite a big change in the UK government leadership. And do you see, or have you had any conversations perhaps with the UK, or are you getting a general feeling or anything that we should be warned about, any changes that are coming our way that might have an impact to the Isle of Man that you wanted to raise with us that we should be aware of?
No, we haven't had any indication that anything is going to change specifically
Okay.
on the immigration side.
Thank you. It was also stated at the government conference that the Isle of Man's immigration legislation has slightly drifted away from the UK. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the different routes, there has been a bit of a drift, but under the CTA, it's quite well respected by the UK that every island has differences, and in terms of their immigration needs, and that their immigration policies need to react to those immigration needs. So that is well understood and appreciated. I think we have drifted to some extent in terms of we've fallen a little bit behind with the legislation changes that the UK made and haven't quite kept up with all the legislation changes. And in that respect, there's been a bit of a drift as well.
Thank you.
So,
okay.
and the differences in the two is a bit of a risk to the CTA,
Right.
to some extent, because if we're not the same, then there's the risk to our immigration system that we may be abused in effect to get through to the CTA rather than just the Isle of Man.
And are there any advantages to the differences between us being slightly different to the UK? Or do you feel it's just more of a risk?
It is more of a risk, but we've sculpted out, or with DFE, key employment, so where it's quite unique for the Isle of Man, whereas the UK may look at a role that they just don't have, but for a small island, we feel we need. So there's
we do see it as a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you actually collaborate with the other Crown dependencies in developing immigration and policies and aligning?
Yeah.
So do you
that's
work
done
well
on
with
a
them?
regular basis. The UK and CD's workshops, so they are possibly 2-3 times a week we're on those workshops, whether it's talking about the Deep Ins project, a rule change, a bit of primary legislation, so they're ongoing.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, do you have any other questions?
Thank you.
No,
No?
very happy. Thank you very much.
That's come to a conclusion for today. Before we draw the session to a close, is there anything else that you would like to share with the committee?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
No, well, on behalf of the committee, thank you very much. We will now sit in